For those who are not familiar with the legislative process in Washington state, the prospect of participating can seem daunting. How does one get involved?
There's a lot of different ways, I think, that regular people can participate in the legislative process.
Washington state contract lobbyist Nick Federici makes a living by participating in the process and has a few suggestions.
Washington is one of the best places in the country for open government, for an open process. I think there are lots of opportunities for people to provide input to their elected officials, town halls that legislators have. There's the opportunity to call or email their legislator, opportunity to come down to Olympia and testify at a hearing, which provides a very open opportunity for anybody to come and let their views be known.
A good place to start is to first learn the legislative process, then get to know all the details of your issue.
I think the more that you know about the process and the more you know about the substance, the more impactful you'll be able to be. The more educated you are about it, the more seriously people will take you.
Hey, how are you?
Very good to see you.
Good to see you too.
Another important step is to get to know the legislators who represent you and their legislative staff.
The more familiar you are to the legislator and to their staff, the better off you are. Legislative assistants are gatekeepers, screeners, advisors in many cases on the input that legislators get. I think it is important for folks to get to know their legislators, and that can be hard, but I think that legislators, some of them, their title is representative. They really do want to be representative of your views.
So what's the best way to connect with busy legislators?
I think the best place to have your voice heard is before things start in Olympia. And when you testify, sometimes you're limited to, 2 minutes, a minute, 30 seconds to be able to try to tell your story. It's much, I think, more impactful and easier to have a regular conversation with someone. And that's best had, I think, and easiest to have back home.
But there are options for those who can't meet with legislators in their home district.
Once things are going on under the dome in Olympia, there's lots of different opportunities. I think the best point is when things are being considered in committee, because that's when folks are very focused on the details and the language in a particular piece of legislation. There's just a handful of legislators at that point that are sort of focused in on that. And I think that there's lots of opportunity to be involved in sort of the ground floor of helping to craft language.
Good morning, Mr. Chair and members of the committee. I thank you for this opportunity and I appreciate your time.
Anybody can come and testify in Olympia. That's part of the joy of our democratic process and the particularly open process that reigns in Washington state. I've seen plenty of people, including some of my colleagues, who don't know anything about what they're talking about and they still come to testify.
What's the best way to be effective when testifying at a committee hearing?
I think that both facts as well as stories help you. Having all the facts around an issue, the data that supports your position, will convince legislators that there's a problem or that they need to do something. Having a personal story about how something has impacted you better sways them that your way of doing things is the right thing to do. Being concise and to the point, I think, is good, and that's very hard oftentimes because people come with important personal stories or of policies that have impacted them or how things should be changed to improve things. And it's hard to get that out in a 30-second, minute, 2-minute set of time frame that a lot of committees allow. I think that being able to know when the hearings are, to be able to get there in time and sign in ahead of time so that you're able to be heard when the hearing is held is very important. Fortunately, Washington, I think, has one of the best systems, both through the legislative website and TVW, about learning about what's happening in Olympia, and then opportunities to contact your legislator and other decision makers to be able to have a positive impact on the outcome.
And what happens if you can't make it to Olympia?
There's lots of different ways, I think, that people can plug into the legislative process even if they're not able to come to Olympia. Something like, a quarter or a third of the population lives in eastern Washington, and it's hard to make that trek over the Cascades to Olympia, particularly to hit a very narrow time window of a public hearing or something. Writing to your legislators, sending emails to your legislators or members of a committee that is overseeing an issue you care about, calling the legislative hotline, calling legislator offices directly, particularly your own legislators, because they're the folks that are there to represent your interests.
What about other ways to get your voice heard in Olympia?
lots of folks have organizations representing them in Olympia, and they may not even know it.
People united, never be divided.
There's obviously strength in numbers, and so the more folks you have who share your opinion and are vocal and informed in communicating that opinion, I think the better off you are. There are relatively few people who take it upon themselves to let their views be known to their legislators, that every additional voice does in fact count and has weight. So if you network then and bring your views forward to a larger group of folks, there's a magnifying effect there.
If you do meet with legislators or testify at a public hearing, just remember the 3 Ps.
I think that being prepared, being passionate, and being polite to the folks that you want to hear your message are good ways to make sure that you put your best foot forward and you get heard as well as you can.
Washington State has one of the most open legislatures in the country, and it was designed to encourage your participation.